Welcome, everybody. Man, good to see you. Love you, Brave San Francisco, Brave San Ramon, Brave Dublin. Give yourselves a hand. All right. I'm Daren Laws. I'm one of the pastors around here, and we're in a great series on healthy relationships. This is week 4. We talked about in week 1, Pastor Samuel talked about communication. Week 2 is on boundaries. Week 3, last weekend, was on forgiveness. And today we're going to talk about joy and sorrow in our relationships. Arlington Cemetery, since 1921, has provided a final resting place, a place of mourning and reflection for those who gave the ultimate sacrifice in military service. The tomb of the unknown soldier is famous. For 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there is always a guard on watch. It doesn't matter if the sun is shining or there's a hurricane going through Washington, D.C., there's always an American soldier of the highest caliber, what they call walking the mat, at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The tomb sentinels have one of the hardest and most coveted jobs in all of the United States Army. There are no other special assignments that have stricter standards. When you're serving as a tomb guard, the job becomes your life for 18 months. It takes an average of 8 hours to prepare just to go on your 24-hour shift. The guard holds their post no matter what. It doesn't matter if they're sick that day or not feeling well, or whatever's going on in their life. They hold their post no matter what. In fact, even one guard was accidentally stabbed in the foot by a bayonet during the changing of the guard, and the guard's face never changed. Many of us guard our loved ones, but not often with the same level of preparation and commitment. And rarely do we loyally guard and love those who are unknown to us. There's an expression, they call it a fair weather friend or a fair weather fan. And I just want to say, I want to just speak to a moment pastorally to the Raider fans and to the A's fans. Can I just have a moment? I just have to say that you are not fair weather fans. You have been through so much. The Raiders leaving town, the A's leaving town, you've gone through so much. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer an amnesty program to all of you to switch teams. Think of me like the Pope today without the robe, all right? You can switch teams, and you're not a fair weather fan, and we love you and thank you for the way you've stuck by them all of these years. Moving right along. Fair weather friends, they're the kind of people that don't stick with you during really tough times. You realize after a while that the relationship is just more about them, because as long as you're encouraging them and you're with them, hey, it's a great relationship. But the moment you start to struggle or have things that you go through, they're not there for you. Well, Jesus taught us to mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice. Well, that's easier said than done. A hallmark of a great relationship is someone cares about your loss, they care about your pain, they care about your sorrows, and they genuinely celebrate your successes. And so today's passage is one of the greatest miracles ever recorded in the Bible. Spoiler alert, someone is raised from the dead in this story. Now, I have never seen any person raised from the dead. Now, understand what I'm about to say. As a pastor, a lot of times I get calls right when people are, really close and they're gonna, and they call me and someone's like really, really sick. And I'll just be honest with you. Like when I pray for somebody like that's really, really ill in the hospital, they tend to die. Okay, you can laugh. It's okay. It's a safe place. I mean, they'll call me to the hospital and I pray for them and they go to be with Jesus. It's like the most amazing thing. And so it got to a point where people would call me and they would say, hey, we think our family member is about ready to pass and we're ready for them to go, Pastor. Will you come pray for for them. And I'd say, oh, you heard about my gift, did you? Right? Thankfully, that's not the case with Jesus, all right? When Jesus gets around death, he always brings life. And he specializes in raising dead things. He can resurrect dead marriages, dead relationships, dead careers. He is the way maker, and he makes a way. And so you can offer him your biggest need and then just see what happens. To show up for others when times are hard, that should be something that we all aspire to in our relationships with one another, even for those who are unknown to us, like the unknown soldier, that we care and have empathy for everyone. Our story is found in John chapter 11. You can go there. You can follow along in your notes, your handouts. The setting is a small town. It's called Bethany. Bethany is a small little village. It's about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. It's on the other side of the Mount of Olives in the wilderness area. So you can kind of imagine what that looks like. Tiny little village where 2 sisters live, Mary and Martha, and their brother Lazarus. They had probably and most likely inherited their parents' home together. They lived together as siblings. They were very close to Jesus. If you've probably heard stories about them. I mean, Martha was the one who one time was so busy when Jesus was at her house and she's cooking and she's serving, and she got upset at her sister Mary, who's sitting at the feet of Jesus in their home, just intently listening to Jesus. And she got upset at her sister. And then there's Mary, that famous scene where Jesus is getting ready to go to the cross that week, and Mary pours perfume over the feet of Jesus. And they were just so close, these three with Jesus. And to understand how really close they were, during the last week of Jesus' life, when he knew he was on his way to the cross, when he knew it was the last week of his life, he chose to stay with them at their home. Think about that. They were so close. I want to be with my dear friends during the last week of my life. Mary, Martha, Lazarus were the closest friends to Jesus. But you know what? Being close to Jesus did not make them immune to suffering or sorrow or pain. In fact, those who suffer the most are oftentimes the closest to Jesus. Paul said it this way in Philippians 3. He said, I want to know Christ. I really want to know him. And then he says, yes, to know the power of his resurrection. And then he says, and participate in his sufferings to become like him. Being close to Jesus, it doesn't mean that you can escape tragedy or pain in life. In fact, this happy little family is about to experience deep sorrow. And even though they love the Lord and they had opened up their hearts and literally opened up their home to him, it didn't insulate them from heartbreak and pain. Maybe you can relate. Maybe this last year or this last decade has been one of sorrow and pain. And yet you've discovered a new closeness to Jesus through it all. When Jesus gets the news that Lazarus is dead, he's about 20 miles away. 20-mile walk on the other side of the Jordan. He has 3 months. He's 3 months away from his own death on the cross. And when the sisters sent the message to Jesus, they simply said these words, Lord, the one you love is sick. And Jesus knew who it was. Wow, what a special relationship. When Jesus heard the news, he said, this sickness will not end in death. And he stayed there for 2 more days. And he told his disciples that his friend Lazarus has fallen asleep and I'm going to go wake him up. And so we pick up in John chapter 11, verse 32. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Mary had seen all of the miracles, the thousands of people that have been healed by Jesus, and she knew, man, if you're sick, that Jesus is around, miracles happen, healings happen, and if you would have been here on time, if you would have got here when I sent the message, he would have been healed. Verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then the shortest verse in all of the Bible, 2 words with great emotion, it says, Jesus wept. He's standing out front of the tomb of his dear friend Lazarus, who's dead, and it says Jesus wept. And then the Jews said, see how much he loved him. But some of them said, could not he open the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man from dying? Point number one, write this down in your notes. Meet people in their disappointment when their prayers feel ignored. Martha and Mary were confused when Jesus delayed his coming to help their brother Lazarus. They must have been thinking similar thoughts that we do when our loved ones are ill or someone in our life is suffering in some great way. God, why won't you help us with this? We know that you can. You've healed others miraculously. Why not me, or why not us? Why let Lazarus die? If we mean anything at all to you, if we're really that close, why wouldn't you rush here? Why wouldn't you show up when it matters most? Have you ever felt that way? I mean, I'll be honest, sometimes I've prayed, hey, God, can I get a little help down here? Hello, right? Have you ever felt like your prayers are being ignored? Well, Jesus finally shows up, and he arrives when they're in the most amount of pain. Lazarus is dead, and it's too late. I've learned that faith isn't about getting what you want when you want. It's more about trusting God with the outcome. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting here on a Monday morning in our Brave staff leadership development time when my son, Pastor Samuel, rushes in and he whispers, hey, Dad, Mom just fell. When I called my wife, Tracy, she was already in the ambulance, and the only words I hear from her is, I fell, blood is pouring out of the side of my head, and they're taking me to the ER, click. When I get there, I tell the person in the ER, my wife's been taken here and I need to see her, and sorry, sir, you can't see her. She's in triage, but when they move her to a private room, then you'll be able to go in. Check back with me in 30 minutes. So I sat there, just like you would. And I sat there with all the questions in my mind, like, what does this mean? What's going to happen next? What's the extent of the head injury? Last I heard, blood's pouring out of the side of her head. Is she dying right now? And of course, Tracy, knowing about my gift, she's probably in there thinking, Daren, please don't pray for me. Right? So I check back with the ER. I go up to the front desk again. They say, sorry, I can't tell you anything. I said, what? It's my wife. What's happening in there? Another half hour goes by. I check in again. Sorry, we can't tell you anything. What? Is this like normal protocol? I mean, is this what they tell people when like your spouse is in critical condition? Like, my gosh, what's going on in there? On this very same day, the Verizon tower at one point went down, right? And so all Verizon customers lost cell service. And Tracy, if she could or had awareness, she couldn't text me from the inside and tell me anything, and we couldn't get a hold of each other, and no one could call me. I couldn't call anybody else, and I just sat there alone in a waiting room with my thoughts. And I waited for 2.5 hours, which felt like 2 days, like Martha and Mary, just waiting for Jesus to come. And I had this overwhelming sense that Jesus then arrived. Like there was this sense of peace and calmness. I'm in a waiting room waiting to hear what's going on with my wife, but it's like I just feel peace. And I kept hearing Psalm 23 over and over in my head. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I don't need to want in this moment. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I will trust God with the outcome. Will she walk again? Will there be any brain damage? Will she come home again? Jesus is with me. I could sense his presence. And I had this like calming of my mind. And I literally entered a rest while I was waiting. And finally, 2.5 hours later, out she comes in a wheelchair. They share with me Tracy had had a concussion. She'd had a CT scan. Everything came back normal. And the reason for the blood pouring out over her head is that when she fell and hit her head, we don't know, either on the wood floor or a piece of furniture, that it had hit a blood vessel. And so blood had gone all over her head, her face, and all over the front of her shirt. And I just thank God that she's here today with us. Amen. As followers of Jesus, even though we have a close relationship with him, we're not immune to the sorrows of this life. Jesus said, in this life, you will experience tribulation, but take heart, be comforted by the fact that I've overcome the world. Now, what does that mean? What he's saying is, I have changed the final outcome to everything. I've changed the final outcome. Meaning, anything and everything in life that has happened to you or will happen to you, I will one day fix it. Revenge is mine, saith the Lord. Injustice, pain, suffering, whatever it is that goes on in this temporary life, which is called a vapor, it's like steam, it passes so quickly. Whatever goes on in this life, and all of its pain is temporary, but God's plan is eternal. I'm in charge of the outcome. But for now, when sorrow comes, it's okay to lament, to weep together, to cry together. Jeremiah even wrote a whole book called Lamentations. It's not a lack of faith on your part or a lack of maturity to fully feel your emotions when you feel grief, when you feel pain and suffering in all of its forms. When Jesus saw the sorrow of Mary and Martha, he felt, the scripture says, he wept. We have emotions because we are made in the image of God, and God has emotions. The reason you have emotions is God created us to have emotions. And what did Jesus do? He went to meet with them, to be with them, meet people in their disappointment when their prayers feel ignored. Have you ever found it strange that how people respond differently to pain, like how other people will start to judge things when pain happens, like that last part of that verse. Well, if he could have healed the blind man, why wasn't he here to heal it? It's like immediately the critics come in and, you finally open up to someone about your pain. They act like they want to hear it. And then you open up about your pain and they go all in on the truth telling, right? Well, you should do this. Well, you shouldn't have done that. Well, you ought to do this. Why don't you do this? Some people can see the love of God in pain, while others immediately begin to question God's love in pain. Jesus' response was to weep. Now, you do know what weeping looks like, right? It's the ugly cry. It's the one where stuff starts coming out your nose. It's just ugly. I mean, you start heaving up and down, and you may want to curl over. I mean, it's just deeply emotional. I felt like this when the Niners lost to the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. It was an ugly cry. But crying, crying's very healing. I mean, for some of us, we want to stop the emotions, but Jesus did not. Dr. Turek from the Cleveland Clinic shares research on the benefits of crying. He says, first of all, crying is like this huge stress reliever. It's really good for you. Dr. Turek says that after a good cry, your parasympathetic nervous system, the system of your nerves in your body, it actually allows your body to rest and digest your food. It allows you to shift from a fight or flight response to the situation you're dealing with. And he says that shift is like a weight is lifted. Have you ever had a really good cry and nothing actually changed, but you just, man, I feel better. There's nothing like a good cry. The second benefit of crying is a deep connection with others. Dr. Turek continues, he says, When we're in a comfortable situation and we're processing events together and talking to each other about what's going on and sharing our emotions, that we can oftentimes, it can tie us together. It can be a way that we bond to one another by creating an atmosphere of human connection. And so healthy friends, point number 2, you can write this down. Healthy friends encourage people that God is with them and working in all things for their good. In this story, in verse 11, Jesus says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. God's will is reality. God's never afraid of reality. We worry about too much reality, but God can overcome any reality, and reality is reality. You've got to deal with reality. And he just says, hey, guys, Lazarus is dead. Not, hey, he passed away or he went to a better place. He's just, hey, he's dead. And it encourages me from this perspective about death. What Jesus is saying here is he's saying for us as believers, death is like falling asleep. And then you wake up in heaven. Death for a believer is you fall asleep and you wake up in heaven. And secondly, what really encourages me about this is you cannot die until your work on earth is done. Lazarus already died, and he still has to come back because guess what? His work on earth wasn't done. He's going to be resurrected. He's going to reveal the power of God and Jesus' ability over death and the grave. And so you can encourage yourself, and you cannot die until your work is done. And so I just want to encourage you, friends, and I want you to encourage your friends to take on worthy mountains in your life. Take on worthy mountains in your life. Make your life matter in a significant way. Serve God in meaningful ways. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for a friend is to help them see what is truly meaningful. Sometimes we get involved and distracted in so many things that don't even matter in life. And we need to be kind of redirected into what does matter. The Bible says that Jesus endured the cross because of the joy that he saw on the other side of the cross. He saw, I'm going to go through this intense, excruciating pain called crucifixion, but on the other side of it, for all of eternity, I'm going to be able to offer eternal salvation to the entire world forever. That's a pretty good trade-off. Jesus said, I'm the resurrection and life. Jesus takes every dead end and creates a new beginning. And I know you've seen it happen in your life. You have. You've experienced some sorrow, some pain, some heartache. And then suddenly, as if it's going to last forever, there's this resurrection moment. And all of a sudden, joy arrives when you least expect it. It's like you thought this pain was going to go on forever. You thought this suffering was going to go on forever. You thought this need was going to go neglected forever. And then all of a sudden something happens and it's a new day. And so we want to encourage people that God is with them and that God is working through all things for good and that nothing is too hard. Nothing is too hard for God. And one of the most profound ways that we can encourage other people is simply by being with them. In the last 25 years and more recently, research has been done on what is called collaborative therapy. And in that research, there's come this new concept that they've introduced. They call it withness. Withness is the state of being fully present or connected with someone. Collaborative therapy says that if the client doesn't feel like their therapist is really with them, the healing may not occur. In healthy relationships, you and I can receive and give the gift of witness. We can say, I am with you. And I don't know what it is about that. Just when someone says, I am with you, you could be going through your darkest time of your life and nobody knows what to say in the lobby of the hospital or the room or on the phone or wherever. And you just say, I don't know what to do, but I I am with you. And you know what? As human beings, that matters. One time I was doing a graveside service, and I stood by my friend's grave, and I was reading all these scriptures of hope of like what awaits every believer. I mean, it's so encouraging. And I was moved in that moment by how my friend had truly honored God with his life. And so all these scriptures that I was reading, all these promises, I'm reading at his graveside, and I realize he's now experiencing it. On the other side, he fell asleep, and now he's in heaven, and he's experiencing this. And I started to cry, and I couldn't hold back the tears. And after the service, his wife came up to me, and she said, you know what? When you cried over my husband, I saw how much you loved him. And that brought such comfort to me that you care. Withness is being fully present with others in their wins and their losses. In their wins and their losses. I got a text this week from a friend, and he said, hey, I know you're in a lot of important meetings this week. Just want to ask, how are you doing? Simple text. Withness. Would you say that word, withness? Go ahead. Let's say it again, witness. Witness. I think being present, being with someone is something that, if I could say this, first of all, I just think women are superior in so many different ways. I'll just get that out there. But I think they're just really good in general, a lot of times at really being with others in really profound ways. And for men, it's kind of like if you go fishing and you're sitting on a pier fishing and you go, hey man, can you pass the red worms? That's like a huge intimate moment for men. Like that, there's a bonding right there that's happening with that right there. But women, they tend to connect more, and they kind of expand their thoughts and feelings. And for example, like if one woman's calling another woman and they're going to meet for the first time or another time, or they haven't met in a while, and they're making arrangements, the conversation's going to go something like, hey, where shall we meet and what time? What kind of car are you driving right now? Okay, well, what are you going to wear? I don't know. I was thinking about wearing this. And do you have any food allergies? Like, man, I'm so excited about getting together. Yeah, me too. It's been way too long. Two guys making arrangements to meet. The phone conversation goes like this. Hey, yeah, okay, got it, bye. We all have to work at being present in being with others. And witness is about wanting to be a better person and being more engaged and more present in life. Witness is not controlling the other person. It's not telling them what they should do. It's not, telling them what they ought to do. It's not judging them. It's not advising them. It's just being with them. We encourage others that God is with them. Point number 1 was meet people in their disappointment when their prayers feel ignored. Be there with them. And then number 2, encourage people that God is with them and working in all things for good. And lastly, point number 3, write this down, rejoice with people when their prayers are answered. In verse 39, it says, take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. If he rose me from the dead, I'd be freaking out right now. I get claustrophobic because thing off me, right? Jesus said, take off those grave clothes and let him go. Yeah, hurry, all right? Verse 45, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. It's like, wow. Have you noticed life just kind of moves forward one day at a time, and sometimes it's just a grind. It's just like Okay, got through Monday, got through Tuesday, got through Wednesday. Man, well, the days are flying by, and it's just like life is, man, we're doing all that we do and juggling all that we juggle. And then sometimes, I don't know, something really great shows up in life. Something happens. Unexpected. This was one of those days for Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. I mean, sometimes people around us are just blessed in really special ways. And one of the marks of a healthy relationship is when you can celebrate the wins of other people. Healthy relationships can mourn together and they can celebrate together. And some people are kind of wired really good on the mourning part. Like they can be with somebody and mourn every day. And you're just like, you have such huge capacity and empathy. But if you think about it, most of the time that doesn't like challenge your ego or your sense of pride or value. It challenges your level of compassion. But celebrating with someone, that requires a different capacity. You know, when someone is winning, when something great happens for someone, well, that's a different scenario altogether. And in that scenario, we might have feelings like, I feel like yucky, I feel like kind of jealous, or feel kind of competitive, like, why did that happen for them? Or, oh, I feel a little insecure, like, wow, why does it always go good for them? And we feel this kind of yuckiness inside. All kinds of emotions can come up in a relationship when someone else experiences a blessing that we don't have or we haven't yet experienced. What do you do with that? Well, in a healthy relationship, you like celebrate genuinely, like you're not even thinking about yourself. You're just so excited with them and for that other person. So take notice next time it happens, how easy is it for you to really celebrate the success of a friend? Because one of the most toxic characteristics in an unhealthy person is when they see others win as their loss. You're kind of going through life comparing yourself by yourself with everybody. Boy, they won there, but I keep losing. In England, they have a term for an aspect of this struggle. They call it the tall poppy syndrome. You know, like poppies, like flowers, the tall poppy syndrome. It's when someone stands out from all the rest. In other words, I'll celebrate you as long as your poppy isn't taller than mine. That your blessings aren't a lot more than mine or too much taller than mine. You know, jealousy is like bad breath. You're the last one to know it, right? And jealousy, it just has a bad odor. It's like someone's been dead for 4 days. It's just not a good look. And everybody sees it on you, and you're saying this stuff, and you're minimizing the other person. It's like, oh my gosh. Jealousy prevents us from celebrating with other people in their times of joy, and it's really small. It can be difficult, you know. I mean, the friend gets promoted, they get a good diagnosis, you didn't get a good diagnosis, they get a new vehicle, you got an old vehicle, new marriage, pregnancy announcement. I mean, all kinds of good news all around you, and others have what you wish you had, or you wonder why it doesn't happen for you. And jealousy just shrinks our hearts. While joy, on the other hand, it grows our hearts. Is your heart big enough to celebrate the joys of others? I mean, truly celebrate all that they have. Mary and Martha celebrated the resurrection of their brother that day. But do you know what? There were all kinds of people standing around in that moment. And you know what some of them were thinking? Well, I wish that would have happened for my loved one. I wish my loved one would have been healed of cancer. I wish my loved one would have been helped. I wish that would have happened for me. But do you know what Jesus was actually demonstrating in that moment? It wasn't any kind of favoritism. He was saying, I'm going to demonstrate to you my power in this moment, that resurrection is available for all our loved ones. resurrection is available for all who believe in me. Isn't that amazing? That death for you and I, it's just a temporary separation. It's not eternal. That resurrection after death is available for all of God's people. And he was demonstrating in that moment, I want you to know once and for all, I have this kind of power because I'm God. And I love you and I weep with you and I care about you. And I think his weeping was more about, wow, guys, Mary, Martha, you don't get it. There's a resurrection. Lazarus is doing really good over there, but I'm going to bring him back and he'll probably be ticked off at me. You see, there's always hope for us as believers. There's always something more to come. Joy is contagious, and the Bible says joy comes in the morning. I love it that God created 24-hour days. There's something about our body resets. It's the next morning. You could have the worst night, and I don't know what it is. The next morning, it's like, whew, whatever that was, I had some bad pizza. But man, joy comes in the morning. On your worst day, when you're down to nothing, God is up to something. Jesus said in verse 25, I am the resurrection and life. The one who believes in me will live, and even though they die, even though we all die, one thing's for certain, you're all going to die, and me too. But not really. If you read about me dying in Facebook, that's just not true. I'm in heaven. I'm alive. I'm more alive. Even though they die, whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then he says, do you believe this? Because it's hard to have hope in this if you don't believe it. Believing in Jesus changes everything. It kind of makes a whole lot of stuff right in your life. If you wouldn't mind just to bow your heads and just close your eyes right where you are. And I'm just asking you to create a quiet place between you and Jesus. And that's why I'm asking you to close your eyes and not be looking around. And I'm asking you to center your thoughts on Jesus, because I want to say some things to you. Create a sacred space right where you are. Here's what I want to say. Look for an opportunity to be with someone this week. Give someone the gift of withness. Be with them. Really be with them in their joy, or really be with them in their sorrow, but be fully present. And then be in tune to Jesus' heart this week, because you're going to be somewhere 20 miles away, a few days away, whatever it is, and Jesus in you is going to want to go be with someone. And you're going to need to do that to be fully present with them and to go where they are and to weep with them and rejoice with them. And remember that no matter what you're going through, whether it's joy or sorrow, that God is good and He is always with us. Let's stand together and let's worship. Listen to the words of this song.